Okay, so my testimony is very long, I'm not going to lie. Bear with me. First of all, happy Easter, happy Resurrection Day. He is risen. My name is Robin Francis. I am married to I'm here today because I love Jesus, but I wasn't always this way. I actually used to be, believe it or not, a very staunch atheist. There were multiple paths in my life that all converged towards God. The Bible says there is great power in testimony. Psalm 107 reads, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story." So here's mine. You may be able to tell from my accent, but I'm not from the UK. I am Canadian, and I grew up in the seaside province of Nova Scotia. Truly a beautiful and quaint part of the world. I enjoyed many a summer lakeside and oceanside. I had a fairly normal childhood. We lived modestly, but were rich in many ways, blessed to live surrounded by crisp nature, never needing to leave our province to holiday, and enjoyed the safety of a small neighborhood. Coming from very difficult upbringings, my mom and dad worked very hard to ensure that we had what we needed and more. However, the one thing they struggled to provide was a strong emotional foundation. There was tension and conflict in the home, a rejection of faith, most likely due to the pain and hurt they experienced as children. My mom dealt with chronic health issues and struggled to keep up with caring for myself and my siblings. So I became very independent from a young age, and I spent most of my life quite lonely without realizing it. In my teenage years, I discovered that I was drawn to the sciences and mathematics. I started to ponder deeper existential questions and began reading online articles and books on relativity, quantum mechanics, higher dimensions, and philosophy in my spare time, contemplating the complexity of the universe and the human experience. Now, this was also while spraying my hair with lemon juice and laying out in the sun with SPF 5. This was the 2000s after all. I was accepted into a university in Canada with a small scholarship. I studied pre-medical sciences, microbiology and immunology, biochemistry and molecular biology, as well as switching gears temporarily to an engineering or applied mathematics degree. In addition to my studies, I took on roles for campus hospitality, front desk shift worker in the summers, and dorm resident assistant during the term time to reduce my living costs. This was great work experience for motherhood. I encountered many a bodily fluid in this time. All of this while maintaining a 4.0 GPA over a few years began a cycle of overworking, overcommitting, and burnout. In my third year, I was diagnosed with anxiety, trying to live up to the academic standards that I thought made me worthy of love and praise. Halfway through my fourth year, my anxiety was so chronic and severe, a doctor suggested I take time off from my studies and take up physical exercise. I decided to reduce my course load to finish off the year. I wanted to document my fitness journey and interact with others similar, so I went to the internet and I discovered the budding online fitness community. I started online accounts sharing my journey and learning from others doing the same. I managed to dramatically improve my health and well-being, gained a sense of purpose and some fulfillment from this. After all, Paul did say, "Bodily exercise profiteth little." My friend at the time, a dentistry student, pointed me towards the four horsemen of New Atheism: Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett. The four horsemen, quite an interesting choice of name, isn't it? Sorry, lost my track. Okay. I wondered, how could anyone believe in God when we know so much about how the world works? I concluded science and faith were incompatible. I now understand how naive that is. Theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg summed it up perfectly when he wrote, "The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you." As I delved deeper into philosophy and how it relates to our understanding of the universe, I read Daniel Dennett's book on determinism, which is basically explaining away free will, and Sean Carroll's book on the multiverse theory and many worlds interpretation. Just as an aside, I really wanted to include this, but yeah. The infinite multiverse theory is currently the best one to explain away God, because instead of one eternal being existing outside of space-time and causing our universe into existence, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. The theory replaces a creator with infinite parallel universes in a sort of information loop. It's been over a decade since I've actually looked into any of this, so I had a little look just to fact check myself. The mental gymnastics it takes to explain our universe without a creator is truly baffling. And we can be assured a few years later there's a new discovery that turns the previous one on its head. Stephen Hawking's final theory before his passing in 2018 posits that there are a finite number of universes. I think it truly requires more faith to be an atheist. I digress. Having fully bought into this atheistic worldview that throws free will out of the window, even in my haughty intellectual superiority, over time I could feel the weight of depression incrementally taking hold. I started to realize that under this worldview, morality is ambiguous, there is no real point to life, and let alone making deliberate sacrifices for one's future and for the good of others. Nevertheless, I was still young and free in my 20s, so I swept it under the rug, replaced it all with pride. Proverbs 16:18 says, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." Proverbs 11:2, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." In the New Testament, James 4:6, "God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble." In the midst of all of this, my online profiles grew, so I decided to move off campus and finish my university degree part-time. Over a couple of years, I built a competitive level physique, and I started to travel North America to compete in bodybuilding and powerlifting competitions. My social media evolved into a successful business, fitness entertainment and education via YouTube and Instagram, as well as online nutrition, bodybuilding, and powerlifting coaching. Certain savvy online companies recognize advertising potential in online creators like myself. I started to get noticed, and I was offered paid partnerships, one of which companies happened to be founded and owned by my husband, Ben. Due to my career being anchored on my physique, it became my new obsession. In the interest of staying competitive in bodybuilding and to look the part, I did something that was very normalized in the industry, but completely against my instincts and the way I was brought up. Nevertheless, I did it. It might seem too personal, but I felt it was important to share this. I got breast implants. It was either the stupidest or the smartest decision of my life, because it is one of the things that ultimately led me to cry out to God. Shortly after the surgery, I started to develop adverse reactions, accumulating over time into something that millions of women have reported experiencing called breast implant illness. I was told by surgeons that silicone is inert, but later I learned it is actually very bioactive with particularly disruptive effects in the female body. Silicone leaches out and binds to estrogen in the blood, causing spikes and crashes in the hormone. Scar tissues form around the implants with immune-provoking biomarkers. This would commence my struggle with chronic illness that would last for the next decade. My health started on a decline almost immediately, first as fatigue. Nevertheless, I continued to travel for work, spending time in LA, collaborating with other women in the online fitness community. Once back home, I decided to combat the fatigue. I needed a change of scenery and figured I should leave overcast Nova Scotia and move across the country to British Columbia, where it was sunnier. The irony is the fact that here I am in the UK. I was given an opportunity by my husband's incredible company to participate in a fitness event in Toronto. It fit in perfectly with my plan to drive across the country and served as a perfect stop point along the way. Going into the event, I knew only a member of staff, and I didn't know of Ben at all. At the last minute, I was informed I would be meeting him, and I thought nothing of it. The next thing that happened has to be one of the most pivotal and bizarre things I have ever experienced. It was the moment that I met Ben. I was invited to the hotel lobby to meet with my manager, other ambassadors of the brand, and him, Ben. I remember this next moment forever. Everyone was already seated in the hotel lobby, and I walked in and sat down. I looked up at Ben, and the very second I made eye contact with him for the first time, I experienced what I can only describe as an electric shock to the brain. I know, it's absolutely crazy. I was incapacitated for a couple of seconds, and I was worried others would notice. I quickly glanced around, but it was as if no time had passed and they hadn't noticed. So despite being shocked, quite literally, I carried on with the meeting as normal. Now, whilst I was an atheist, I could not shake that I had experienced something supernatural, or at least supernatural in timing. Whilst atheist, I knew that it was God saying that we were meant to be together. How do we explain that? Me, being a rational thinker, thought that was absurd, of course, and ignored it. Regardless, from that first meeting, Ben and I were captivated with one another. Looking back, it was love at first sight, but due to our personal circumstances at the time and the professional nature of the relationship, we remained as friends. We went our separate ways, me to BC and Ben back to the UK. Obviously, the story didn't end here. Ben, being the savvy young businessman that he was, planned and implemented a tour hitting all the important cities worldwide for his brand ambassadors to meet fans. This plan was strictly for business reasons only, but conveniently, we happened to get to spend a lot of extra time together and got to know one another a bit more, and eventually we gave in and became one another's romantic interests. We continued on the tour traveling. It was more than my wildest career dreams come true. I could no longer keep up with my online coaching, so I launched an online PDF program which flew. I made more money and I had more opportunities than I ever thought I would. On the other side, with the toll of travel, my health started to decline. Since Ben and I officially started dating, we moved to Toronto to minimize flight times. After learning how hard long distance was, we agreed that my business was portable and Ben's was not, so I offered to move to the UK rather than he to Canada, so we could remain together whilst Ben grew his business. After moving, my health continued to suffer. I assumed it was just the shock of moving to a new country, or perhaps the lack of sunshine. Between travel, I worked from home alone all day. It is not very sunny here. I have to say. Between travel, I worked from home alone all day, and I started to no longer have the energy to get up in the mornings, and some days to do anything at all. I started reacting poorly to foods I had always eaten, and brain fog started creeping in. This took a toll on mine and Ben's relationship, but whenever it seemed like I should give up on our relationship and move back to Canada, I remembered in the back of my mind that God meant for us to be together. The struggle went on for a few years. Eventually, I was in a state of chronic illness, chronic fatigue and pain, brain fog, anxiety, memory issues. I was diagnosed with ADHD, my hair was breaking off, and I just looked really ill. I remember barely having the energy to wash my hair, and I could only do one thing in a day and then I would be exhausted. I was not performing at work the way that I had always been, and I couldn't understand why. Life felt bleak and pointless, and as depression took hold again, I began to ponder those existential questions once again. A friend and fellow brand ambassador pointed me towards Jordan Peterson, a Canadian psychologist and former clinician and university professor. He's like the modern-day Carl Jung, if you've ever heard of him. I credit Peterson for kickstarting my journey to seek truth and God. He does Christianity for atheists brilliantly, so if you know anyone, point them to him. Desperate to finding meaning in my life, I read his book, 12 Rules for Life, which, although secular, forms a strong intellectual argument for Christian truths like suffering and sacrifice. His ideas really resonated with me, so I wanted to learn more. I listened to his lecture series on the biblical narrative viewed from the lens of neuropsychology, that the biblical stories transcend mere history and speak on timeless psychological truths, consciousness, morality, and are embedded in our cognitive makeup, even. He speaks on the idea of being Christ-like in that an individual's voluntary confrontation of suffering transforms life's chaos into meaningful order, how evil manifested in communist states, and the idea of hell, even though he characterizes it as an abstract concept, is necessary to propel us towards the capital G good, which we know who that is. He even describes a dream he had of all kings bowing down to Jesus, the King of Kings. It's truly fascinating. Despite being agnostic himself, Peterson has been quoted as saying that the Bible's narrative as it flows from the Old to the New Testaments leading to Jesus Christ, ultimate sacrifice on the cross and his fulfillment of God's redemptive plans is the most beautifully complete and perfect story. This hit me. I was starting to believe. I began to see the Bible and Christianity in an entirely new light. It was no longer antiquated nonsense to me, but rather something with depth of meaning and real-life practical application. I started to think, this Jesus is really someone that I should look into further. I was desperately trying to positive my health issues, but it was around this time I recognized they were still getting worse. I felt I was slowly dying, sadly not an exaggeration. I thought I have to do something. Ben's business had grown so much and his work was so busy that there was no slowing down. This was when a fellow YouTube influencer came out with her breast implant illness testimony describing exactly what I had experienced. She pointed to a few places to do research on how to find a surgeon who would properly remove the implants and all associated tissue to set up for recovery. I figured at this point I had no other option, so after 3 long years, I got a full capsulectomy and explant. When I woke up from the surgery, I felt and looked markedly better. It was like night and day. During my recovery, I got right to overhauling my diet, making homemade juices to help my body detoxify, and eating whole foods. Over the next year, I was nearly recovered. Woohoo! It was short-lived, sadly, because it was the end of 2019, and we all know what happened then. I contracted the dreaded COVID. It was awful, and sadly it lingered. I had long COVID. The virus triggered an autoimmune issues, and I was thrust back into chronic illness. I was still depressed, and so hard on myself for not being able to further my career the way I wanted to. I was always just treading water. This was when I reached my lowest of my lows. My anxiety was so high I developed insomnia. I was self-medicating to sleep, and the depression was back with a vengeance. I could no longer work or even think in the way my entire identity was built off of. I was faced with having to parse through all of the buried emotional trauma and the loneliness I experienced throughout my life, and there was no way I could work hard enough to overcome this. I was at the end of myself. I remember having this weight of a realization of never having a close relationship with my mother, and that no one truly loved me in that way. I thought I would have this hole in my heart forever, and there was nothing that could fix it. It was in this moment I had a revelation that Jesus can fill that hole. And I felt God say, I love you. I was not a believer yet, but I was on a journey. I slowly started to let go of things I held on to so dearly. I was open to kind of all monotheistic religions like Christianity, but also Judaism and Islam, because I just didn't know anything really about the other ones. One night, I was laying awake with insomnia from my usual pain, and I decided to ask God if he was real. I cried out to him in prayer, asking him, God, if you're real, please take away my pain. I instantly felt a warm, tingling wave starting from the crown of my head, traveling down to my toes, just melting all of the pain away. I was awestruck. I had another request. God, if you're real, show me a sign. I opened my eyes, and in the dark of the room, I saw a perfect equilateral triangle in the brightest moonlight. I remember thinking, well, this isn't a cross. Then I Google searched a triangle as it relates to Christianity, and nothing meaningful came up. Just this past year, I learned that God's numerical logo is 3, symbolizing his Trinitarian nature. God revealed himself to me as the triune Christian God. In January 2021, I decided to give up all sleep aids, painkillers, and caffeine and began to research natural healing. I learned I had developed inflammatory gut, a dairy allergy, a histamine intolerance, and likely an autoimmune condition called mast cell activation syndrome, which is like an overactive immune system. I started an elimination diet to work out what and when I should avoid eating to relieve symptoms. A work colleague I knew had shared on Instagram that she gave her life to Christ and got baptized, so I asked her for some advice. She kindly gave me a devotional, and I bought a Bible and started reading. I remember that I read one of the Gospels, but I didn't glean the gospel message from it. Via text, I explained to her that what I thought the message was, and she corrected me and told me the true message of the gospel, that Jesus died for our sins. But I just thought, oh, and then I didn't really fully understand it. In the spring of 2021, Ben and I got engaged after 5 years together. I remember feeling a push to be obedient to God and not to put off getting married. We planned our wedding in 4 months' time. We moved to the Cotswolds into an ongoing renovation project, and Ben took on the role of CEO of his company. My stress levels were at an all-time high, and I was only getting more sensitive to food. I found the only foods I didn't react to were well-done beef and potatoes, so I only ate that. It was about 1.5 years only eating that. I was at this time I came to the realization that I had to let something go. So to focus on the renovation, home duties, wedding planning, and my health, with Ben's help, he helped the whole way along this, I made the decision to step back from my career. During any free time, I watched the Bible Project on YouTube to gain an understanding of the Bible as a whole. In September 2021, in one of the most joyous and best days of our lives, Ben and I were married in a tiny chapel and set our vows as a covenant between us and God. It was after our wedding that really grew a hunger for God, when I really grew a hunger for God and his word. I really wanted to understand what I was reading, so I listened to in-depth Bible studies of the books of the New Testament. This is when I finally heard a version of the gospel message explained in a way that I finally truly understood. Our infinite creator God came down to earth to pay a price that we couldn't pay. He humbled himself enough to be born as a man, live a perfect life not one of us could, just to be brutally killed by being nailed on a cross, fulfilling his own law. Then Jesus was raised from the dead, a miracle only God himself could perform. I was moved to tears. I fully accepted Jesus into my heart, accepted God's free gift of salvation, and I began my Christian walk. I remember soon after starting to hear from the Holy Spirit, who gently led me on a path to healing. Mine and Ben's first year of marriage was not all smooth sailing. I still had a lot of unresolved issues stemming from my childhood, but God was with me every step of the way. He heard my prayers and he comforted me. He provided for me even when I didn't deserve it. He led me to unlearn some of the hyper-feminist views I held, that the role of a mother in society was less than. I kept praying I wasn't ready to have children, God, even though I knew it was part of my calling. He continued to guide me to healing emotionally and physically, readying me. I remember the day that I prayed to him and said, "Okay, God, I'm ready to have children now." The week after I fell pregnant with our beautiful twin boys, God clearly held me to my word. I stayed close to God through my pregnancy, but had a somewhat traumatic birth and trying time with the twins' first few months. I lost dedication to my faith and drifted away from God. I went through many trials and hardships the first year with my twins. It was the new, most difficult phase of life I've ever been through. I developed postpartum depression, and I was back to chronic anxiety and insomnia. I didn't think God was into the minute details of my life, but how wrong I was. I cried out to him during this time, and he was right back with me, comforting me. Jesus says in Matthew 10:29-31, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are numbered, so don't be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows." After Theo and Eli's first birthday, I fell pregnant with William. This was a really tough pregnancy, and my walk faltered again. I knew I needed to be close to God for William's birth, so I drew near to him again, and again he was there with me. Deuteronomy 4:30-31 says, "When you are in distress and in all these things have happened to you, then in later days you will return to the Lord your God and obey him. For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not abandon or destroy you." Psalm 34:4 says, "I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears." Over time, God started revealing areas of my life that I hadn't fully surrendered to him. This past summer, he started to give me dreams and visions, one of which was a call to turn from an ongoing sin that I allowed to quietly exist in my life. I was idolizing material goods. He showed me the enemy stalking like a tiger and warned me to let go of the enemy's hand and to follow him, lest I be devoured. Serious stuff. It was after this I came to full repentance, turning away from my sin, and fully surrendered my life to Jesus, asking him into all areas of my life and realizing that I can't do anything in my own strength. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, "But Christ said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.'" I began to read the New Testament with a fresh set of eyes. The past 6 months, God taught me that I need to obey him, but I was never meant to do this on my own. He would help me do it. This is when the chains truly broke. I felt relief and the blessings started pouring in, and the unending joy and peace started pouring out. I stand here today to say that Jesus freed me from my anxiety, depression, insomnia, and worry. He freed me from deriving my worth from my knowledge, appearance, career, money, and material goods. He has redeemed my marriage. He has healed me emotionally and physically, and he has made me new in him. Jesus has taught me true joy, sacrificial love, forgiveness, humility, and godly wisdom. I have tasted what the world has to offer, and I have achieved a degree of fame and riches, and I'm telling you that nothing can replace a relationship with our Creator. I think we are all searching for love, but at the same time, we don't feel worthy of true love. So we reject God. I mean, speaking to those who have, obviously. A lot of us here know. The truth is, we are not worth of God's love in our sin, but God the Father, in his perfect, merciful love, made a way for us through his Son. John 14:6 says, Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." When we believe with all our hearts in Jesus' death and resurrection, we allow God to complete a transaction. We are bought by his blood and covered in Christ's cloak of righteousness. God then sees us just as his perfect Son, worthy of all love and closeness to him. Living for Jesus isn't a life sentence. It is complete freedom. Freedom from any insecurity, freedom from sin, freedom from addiction and idolatry, freedom from others' perceptions and opinions of you, freedom from societal and cultural expectations, freedom from worry. He truly breaks all of the chains. I thank God every day for what he did for me. I'll leave you with 3 things. I'm nearly done. An honest search for the truth always leads to the foot of the cross. Tragedy is an inevitable part of life. Instead of pushing or explaining God away in the face of tragedy, I encourage you to draw near to him instead. Jesus is waiting for you with open arms. Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And that's it. And I just also wanted to say thank you so much for welcoming me into this church family. I put off going to church for a very long time, and I just couldn't be happier with just how it's just so much joy getting to know all of you, and just such a wonderful environment. So thank you, and thanks for listening to my very long testimony.